Welcome to the Sankofa Pan-African series. We travel through history's corridors, illuminating Afrocentric narratives. Support us through Patreon or by buying me coffee. Your subscription is a great start, but do hit the bell for notifications so you know when we have new episodes. Share our videos and visit our website sankofastorybooks.com for stories, biographies, Afrocentric nursery rhymes, and other resources for children. Together can change the negative narratives about us.
Our guest today is someone I'm extremely excited to be talking to. He's a young man who his name is Jay Sukpa. He's a spoken word poet, a musician, storyteller with a passion for addressing mental wellness, also social justice and issues of masculinity. This is something I find admirable about him as a young creative, taking on issues of masculinity and political activism. And his poetry is all done through the lens of family dynamics and personal experiences. He draws from real life stories and extensive research. His works build bridges and challenge narratives. I've heard some of his poetry, and I'm really very, very impressed, with what he's doing. It's apparent from his work that he's proud of his roots, and he embodies the belief, that something good can come out of Nazareth. Now, that's a sentence that is actually, you can see his part, and I'm hoping he'll elaborate a bit more on that for us today. His poetic journey has been influenced by Sully Breaks, and he has earned, Jay Sukpa has earned notable accolades, including the inaugural Lagos Books and Arts Festival Poetry Slam 2024, the Kayode Aderioku Prize for poetry. And then he was also placed runner-up in the Lagos State Poetry Festival Slam in 2023, among several other accolades. I'm personally of the opinion that this young man has far to go, and this is just the beginning. Welcome, Jay.
Thank you so much, man. Thank you for that introduction. At some point, I was feeling
like wondering who is this about. It's you. I mean, I just happened to, I accidentally ran into the poetry competition online, and I was very, very impressed with your rendition of your poems, and then you now turning out to be, because there were a lot of other good poets, that you topped the category is also very, very impressive. So, as a poet, what inspired you to become a poet? Poetry is not something that is that you go into if you want to make quick money. Writing generally is not something you go into if you want to make. So what inspired you to become a poet?
So I like to tell people that I didn't start my life as a writer. When I was in school, I was a science student, but then I taught my class in English. I taught my school in English, but I didn't even know anything pertaining poetry at that point. But for me, I just wanted to write, and I loved writing. And one of those days, my brother brought home his phone. He bought it from someone, and in the phone, I stumbled on a video by Sully Breaks. The guy had influenced my poet, and then I stumbled on the video, and somehow it felt like some other force drew me to this thing, and I don't know, somehow I felt really connected to it. And from that point, I started to research, do rigorous research, and started to connect with poets in Nigeria. And that's how the journey began.
Awesome. Now, that statement that I read about you saying something good can come out of Nazareth, can you please unpack it? Because I think it's a loaded statement.
Yeah. So where I grew up in is this place where on face value, nobody would feel like something somebody can come out of this place.
Oh.
In my case, no one knows what a poet is, what poetry
Mm.
is. No one. mm, If I tell someone I'm a poet today, even till today, if I tell someone I'm a poet, they will ask me what is poet, what is poet.
Mm.
But then I decided that I wanted to be a poet. I wanted to write, and I gave myself to this art. And in some way, I've become somebody that people look up to, even in that case. And it is proof that you can start up from somewhere and somewhere that people do not recognize, people think less of, and you can be anything you want.
Mm.
For me, being a poet was choosing my own destiny, choosing what I wanted to be, and
Mm.
running with it.
So may I ask, where did you grow up?
I grew up in a community that is called Igbo Alijo. I grew up in two communities. I live in two communities, Igbo Alijo and Ategule.
Oh.
So if you go to Google Maps, Igbo Alijo, it Igbo Igbos. And I don't know why it's like that, but you should know Ategule.
Yeah, and Ajegula
Yeah.
is famous for having turned up some fantastic creatives. So maybe not Ajegula. I think Ajegula, yes, over the years has proven that a lot of good things can come out of that Nazareth.
And for a long time, we have to battle this stereotype around
Yes,
the city. So,
yes.
so when people hear Ategule, the first thought that comes to their mind is violence and all that. So we are proving that it's not only about the violence. Beautiful things can
Mhm.
come out.
Mm. Fantastic. So and then going forward, I there are some recurring themes in your poetry. Themes about
Yeah.
identity, culture, resistance, and a need for unity. And so, what is it that keeps bringing you back to these same themes over and over again?
Like I said, it's basically the family structure. I think from childhood, I witnessed a whole lot of dysfunction. And for somebody who didn't grow up in a place, in a space where these things are talked about, we tend to sponge up these things, swallow up these things subconsciously, and we won't know really until today it still happens. The children won't know until you grow up and start exhibiting some behaviors that you don't know where this thing came from. Yeah, I think
Hmm.
that is picked up as a child. So for the fact that I have this art, I can write, I can talk about these things. I've made it a point of duty to pinpoint these things. The need for unity in my community, in my personal space, the need for unity in the family structure, the need for talking about social issues, mental issues, and all that, basically from the point of the family structure. So if everyone is talking about it from another perspective, I like to talk about it from a perspective that I know personally, and that is the family, something that I have witnessed firsthand. And for a long time, I had to go back. I had to do this retrospection. I had to go back to these things and try to help me understand how these things came to be. Why am I being like this? Why is my brother being like this? Sometimes it's not their fault.
Mm. Mm.
It's picked up.
Mm. Awesome.
So
And
I like
then, yeah, and like research has shown, yeah, whilst you can be looking at things at global or national levels, the personal is also political, you know. If within the family structure, there is rancor, there is violence, and all of that, invariably it affects, larger society.
yes.
So
So
what you're doing is
I'm
really
of the opinion that
important.
it starts there. I'm of the opinion that that's where it starts.
Yeah,
That's where it begins.
yeah. Okay, so could you please just share one of your poems with us?
This isn't a daddy issue poem, I promise, but I have lived half my father's lifetime with these poems. These lines bear witness to his wrong decisions. I Still hear echoes of his regrets when I touch myself. The first time a girl stood up to me in front of my friends, I felt her words cut through my pride like chainsaw to an almond tree. Her eyes threw stones at my glass ego crash, every broken piece reminding me of how I needed piecing. But oh boy, now you should follow tram if not me while I'm my friend's voice was the one proof I needed to know I had failed my first test. So the next time a girl stood up to me in front of our friends, I molded my broken ego into a fist and Floyd Mayweather the racetrack for red blood cells on her nose. Painted my insecurities on her cheeks till her tears came out dressed like my fears. This was how we learned to be men. Boys who once swore humaneness with swag now forced to pretend like their fathers. And their fathers' fathers, the emotions which once made them human has become too feminine for their thick skins. Imagine talking to random boys about love and empathy. This is how it all begins. We teach our boys to admire violence as kids, then wonder where they learn to forcefully break things. Bottles, arts. To man up like this physical structure isn't proof enough of their gender. We form weapons of their ignorance yet fail to teach them that even if our world has become a shooting range, the opposite gender is no tool for target practice. And when they join the list of weapons formed against us like the president's cabinet, we pick and pass the blame like ballot boxes burdened with biased opinions. This is where it all begins. The last time I threw a punch at a girl, it missed its target like Arsenal FC aiming for the league last season and bounced off my victim's breasts. Watching my sister bow in pain as though worshipping my masculinity, I realized just how empty, regretful and weak this show of strength can make you feel. Somewhere beneath this black soil still lies that 14-year-old landmine. I still have his lunch coat buried in these palms. Still hear the disappointment in my friend's voice reverberate through the shards of my broken ego whenever I say no to this rage. But I have learned a weapon will always be a weapon. It's you who decides the battles you fight.
Thank you. That is such a powerful poem, and I'm amazed at the maturity and your commitment, to dismantling those structures that have been there for centuries and are taken for granted. The fact that you are questioning, the way in which we have viewed masculinity, and you're doing it, it's brilliant. It's fantastic. I really, really love it. And yes, you started out by saying it's not a daddy poem. Why did you think you needed to start out with that? Because at the end of the day, it is a daddy issue poem.
Why I needed to say that was I believe we are responsible for our decisions. So personally, when I wrote that poem, I had written a few daddy poems, and then I was performing that. I wanted to perform that poem one of those days, and I didn't include that part initially, but I wanted to perform that poem one of those days, and because I had performed one other daddy poem, I have to make it clear that this one I'm performing, I want to perform. It's not a daddy poem, even though it would look like it, but I'm of the opinion that we are responsible. At the end of the day, we may blame our fathers, we may blame our mothers and all that, but we are responsible for our own decisions. And it's our duty to try as much as we can to own up to those decisions, to take responsibility for those decisions and man up in that sense.
Yeah. But what I also like about it is the fact that, yes, as adults or even as young as youths, we might have been socialized a certain way. But like you said, ultimately we are responsible for the steps we take, for the kind of adults we become, and the kind of society we end up, in, which I think, correct me if I'm wrong, is why you've talked about the ballot box and all of that. Can you please expatiate a bit more on that? Because I love the way in which you make these
I
connections, in
I
this.
try as much as I can, try as much as I can to also include the social commentary, even when
Mm,
I'm talking about present situation. So now I'm talking about the family structure, but at the end of the day, like I said before, it all starts here and then it ends here. Before that part, I talked about how we teach our boys to be this and that, and at the end of the day, when they become those things that we teach them to be, when they start, there's a part that says, this is how they learn to be men. Boys who want for you remain sexual now forced to pretend like their fathers. That's why
mhm.
I say it's not a daddy, like we are
Yeah,
pretending fathers
yeah,
because our fathers to be men in that same sense
yeah.
that the emotions that once made us human has become too feminine for our 16. That means we grew up with some emotions, we owned up to some emotions, and at some point in our life, we were taught that these are girly emotions, these are feminine emotions. Yeah. So that part says has become too feminine for their 16. Teach our boys to admire violence, we teach them to admire violence as peace, right? And then we
Mm,
wonder where they learn, we have taught them, and now we are wondering where they learn to forcefully break things. What
yes.
are they break bottles that relate to gang violence and all that? And then they break hymen's, sexual abuse, they break art,
Mm,
ultimately, the broader structure. So once one thing affects one person, it affects the entire
yes.
community. So
Yeah.
from that point, when they start breaking bottles, they easily become weapons for the government, tools that the government use. So it
Mm,
says they join the weapons against us like the president's cabinet. That part is mentioned sarcastic actually. Because the president cabinet, they are the weapons formed against us in Nigeria. So they join those weapons, they join them as a team. Those people use them to do their business in the society.
mm, mm,
And ultimately they start to become the people that we fear. They start to become our bad example. And then we got to a part where I say, when the weapons formed against us, we start to pick and pass the blame. So it's not my fault, it's your fault, it's not my fault, it's your fault. We tend to
mm,
blame each other for what turned out instead of
mm,
owning up to the fact that it all started from the home, it all
mhm,
started from our home.
mm,
Government did not raise, the
mm.
government did not just come, saw them in the house
Yeah,
and pick them.
yeah, yeah. It's almost moot for me to be asking this question because everything I've seen that you've written and heard you talk about kind of points one to kind of assume what role you think poets should play in the society, but I'll still throw it to you anyway. So what role do you think poets and other creatives, actually creative people, writers, musicians and all of that, what role do you think they can play in shaping society and then trying to change some of the negative narratives, you know, that are out there?
Okay. So I believe every movement starts with a conversation. Yeah, from the Black Panther movement in America to every other movement, even in Nigeria, to the NSAS movement and every other thing. I
Mhm.
believe it all started with conversation. So as creatives, if we can stir up that conversation through our creative works, then from there we can build up to the point where it changes things
Mm,
materially.
mm.
It all starts with the kind of conversation that we personally want to stir up.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, beautiful. Now you talked about your Suli breaks influencing you. He's British based, uh, uh, I call him a pan-African um, a poet, and he's influencing you out there in Nigeria, in Ajegunle, and all of that. So again, how has your African heritage, or how can our African heritage? If we are people who are creatives, poets or whatever, how can our African heritage influence our voice and the themes we tackle? Are there bridges? Are there connections between your situation in Nigeria and the Sulibrek situation in Britain, or somebody else who is writing from the US, Kenya, South Africa, wherever, the Caribbean?
Yeah, so I watched a Maya Angelou interview one time, and then she talked about how she wrote a poem. She mentioned a name, I've forgotten that name. Said she wrote a poem, she was observing the woman, and then she wrote a poem inspired by that woman. And somehow that poem did not only influence women, it also influenced a man from another country who told her. So for the African experience influencing my work, how my work can, how the African experience can shape my work and also affect people in different geographical locations.
Mm-hmm.
I I can say that it's a matter of the truth. It's a
Sorry?
matter of owning. It's a matter of owning your truth. It's a matter
Yes.
of owning it. So if I own my truth, there is no point here. It will look. Fully Breaks is an African American, so there is that
I think he's
connection.
British.
But
I think he's British.
yeah,
Yeah,
sorry, he's
he's British.
African and he did not own up to, and he's also a Muslim. I'm a Christian,
Yes.
but
Yes.
that does not any way invalidate the fact that I will always say he influenced me. Why? Because he owned up to his truth as not just a person, not just a black man, but a black man with roots in Africa.
Hmm.
As a creative, if I cannot own up to my truth, first from my present surrounding, and someone in say Georgia may not understand what's going on presently in the Nigerian reality. Sometimes the news and everything may reshape what they know. So
Hmm.
they may believe something that is not the actual reality here in
Hmm.
the country. As a creative, it's my duty to pick up those things that are the actual reality and try as much as I can to help those people that are not here understand that this is the actual reality. So in my
Hmm.
story, this is the actual reality. This is the
Hmm.
African experience.
Hmm. And in a lot of the instances, help them also find connections, just as you have found connections with Solly Break's poetry. You've never met him, he's never been to Nigeria, he hasn't been in your shoes, but there are certain connections, that you share, as people of African descent. Yeah, yeah, thank you. Yeah, so before we round up, what advice would you have for people coming behind you, up and coming people who have a desire to write, or who have the inclination to be creative in one way or another? What advice would you give them?
So I'll say first is to be patient with yourself. This is something I learned the hard way.
Mm,
First, be patient with yourself. Um, I'll speak to poets. I understand that even I am coming up here, but I've built myself to the point where I'm here having an interview with you, right? So, and that happened because I was patient with myself. That
mm,
happened because I didn't look at someone else's journey and try to compare mine with theirs. And secondly is to know what you do. And there is a lot of things that you move on from there in knowing what you do. It's not just about doing something. 2019, I had to leave performance poetry altogether. And for 3 years, I had to go back because, like I said, I didn't start off as a prose poet. I didn't start off as a writer. I started off writing and performing because I saw fully braids. And at some point, I had to sit myself down and tell myself, you are a good performer. No one disputes that. But what about the thing that you are writing? How good are you with saying a new sentence with just 5, 6 words? So I have to go back to the basics and learn the basics for 2 years. So first, be patient with yourself. This thing is not going anywhere, and that this thing is not going anywhere. Be patient with yourself. Understand what you are doing as a poet. Learn the art form itself. Nobody has a monopoly of knowledge. Nobody knows everything 100%.
Yeah.
But as much as you can. No. And another thing is to ask the right question. Not just questions, to ask the right question. Someone I respect so much helped me understand this, and it taught me a lot. Asking the right question. And another thing is workshops for poets. Yeah, for us golden poets, there is this tendency for wanting to be seen, for wanting to be in the limelight. And we tend to look for um, poetry slams, poetry events where we can perform and all that. It is good, right? But if you don't know something, you won't be able to defend it in time to come. So I feel like there has to be that balance between performing and learning, going for poetry workshops. Yes, and the fifth one is to know your truth and live in your truth. For me, why I talk about the family structure is basically I have written more poems about women than I have written for any other thing. Mainly because there are some things that my mother doesn't know how to read or write. But I I grew up under a whole lot of things that she passed down to me. It beyond it is beyond reading or writing. So I feel like the fact that she was able to help me get something that she couldn't get, it is my duty as well to help her see the things that she doesn't have a platform to say. So the things that she wants to say as a woman, I love now to say these things. The things that my sisters want, it is my duty as a poet to say these things through my heart. So that is my truth. That is me living in my truth, and that is me understanding my truth. And as an addition, with research, there's a lot that goes into writing a 3 minute poem. And I feel like so many persons don't know that, but there's a lot that goes into it. One is research. I might want to write something about women, right? And I might go to my mother, talk to her about these things. Yeah. But at the end of the day, I'm not just writing it for my mother. I'm writing it for other mothers out there. So I have to get different perspectives to this thing. And as I get different perspectives to this thing, I try as much as I can to make it broader. So in as much as I'm starting from, just like a child grows up in his own home and then he moves out, in as much as I'm starting this work from my personal experience as a person, I have to try as much as I can to make it broader, to push it out to the world, to help the world see my perspective.
Now, Jay, for those who like me have fallen in love with your poetry, how can they, do you have a collection out or one coming out soon? And then where can they lay their hands on it?
I'm working on a collection. I'm working on a collection at the moment. It's not out yet, but they can find me on Instagram. My handle is at Jay Sukpa, CHEJAYSUKPA, at Jay Sukpa.
Thank you very much, G. It's been an exciting, enlightening, and enjoyable session. Talking, and I look forward to reading more about you. Thank you.